Hey, I was waiting for the sign from the leader, Kate, but she walked out. So I'm going to go ahead and help and welcome you all here today. Thank you for being here. My name is Patty Arnold, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Institutional Advancement here at the Garden. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here to today's program to kick off our Member Appreciation Days. Member Appreciation Days are happening now through Sunday, and I have to say it's my favorite week of the year. Not because of that we just have all kinds of special things. We supersize our benefits for you all with 20% off memberships, 10% off dining, special experiences, and of course the exciting start of Garden Glow, our festive holiday season. And after today's program, you'll have to stop by the little shop around the corner, and you can enjoy light refreshments and an additional 20% off regular member discount until 4 o'clock. That's a special deal today. And all week long, be sure to visit our wonderful neighborhood partners, local shops and restaurants offering 10% off to all garden members. Just show your membership card and take advantage of the savings. They're all listed right there. We do all of this as a heartfelt thank you. Our members make the garden stronger, not just through your generous support, but by being our most loyal visitors, volunteers, advocates, and ambassadors. The garden would not be what it is today without the 50,000 plus member households that make our mission possible. Isn't that amazing? 50,000. So great. Thank you. Thank you all. Now it's my pleasure to introduce someone who represents that member spirit so well. A longtime member of the Henry Shaw Society, a devoted garden leader, a Herb Society volunteer. I think there's some other Herb Society volunteers in here today, and a garden docent in training. Lori Halverson was president of the members board from 2011 to 2012 and continues to serve on that board, remaining one of the garden's most dedicated champions. Please join me in welcoming Lori, who will introduce our special guest, Dr. Lúcia Lohmann, to lead us in what promises to be a wonderful conversation. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today's program is part of the Members Speaker Series, and this is a monthly lecture series that is sponsored by the Members Board here at the Garden. And today we are so delighted to have this opportunity to have a conversation with Dr. Lúcia Lohmann. Dr. Lohmann is the 8th president of the Missouri Botanical Garden, and she is the first woman president in its 166-year history. Dr. Lohmann was born in São Paulo, Brazil. She attended the University of São Paulo and received her undergraduate degree there. Then her studies brought her to St. Louis, and specifically to UMSL, where she earned her master's and doctorate degrees in biology, with emphasis in ecology, evolution, and systematics. During her time here, she conducted research at the Missouri Botanical Garden, and actually lived just a few blocks from where we are today. In the years following her first tenure here in St. Louis, Dr. Lohmann rose to become a world-renowned botanist, conservation researcher, and educator. She served on the faculty of her alma mater in São Paulo, as well as the University of California, Berkeley. Her research has focused on neotropical biodiversity, with particular interest in the Amazon basin. She has also served as the executive director of the Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation, and as president of the International Association for Plant Taxonomy. Dr. Lohmann officially took the reins of the garden on January 2nd of this year. And on October 16th, just a few weeks ago, she continued the tradition of every garden president before her when she was installed as the George Engelman Professor of Botany at Washington University. The scope of Dr. Lohmann's research and her years of experience in the scientific world, combined with her strong sense of community, collaboration, inspired her vision for the garden today and into the future. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Lúcia Lohmann. Good to see you.
So nice to be here. This is fun.
Well, I think we'll get started. And I really want to just dive right in and find out, you've spent your life studying plants.
Yes.
And when did that fascination with plants take hold?
Well, so in some ways it's interesting. Like, I feel like a lot of us, well, everybody here, really fascinated with plants. It all starts in our childhood, right? I think all of you probably have childhood memories of plants and so forth, and that's exactly how I feel. Mm-hmm. So since my early days as a child, a lot of my memories are playing around with plants, and I was the little kid that was collecting leaves and looking at flowers and making toys out of plants, actually.
Very good. That's interesting. And were your parents supportive of your interest in plants as you were growing up?
Yes. So I used to travel quite a bit with my parents, and my grandfather, who's actually in that photo right there, had a little property in the countryside of São Paulo, where I used to go with my family every holiday season. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather was actually also really a visionary, because at the time, so he got this property, this is back in the 50s, and he started buying land of Atlantic forest to make sure it would remain intact.
Oh, okay. That was really, you're right, he was a visionary, definitely. Yeah. So you continued with your interest of plants as you were growing up, but when you decided or thought that you might make a career out of it, how did they respond to that?
Oh, that's interesting. So they loved when I was a little kid, really immersed in nature and so forth. But the day I came back home and told my mom, well, I had been on a trip I was in high school and went on a trip to a national park in Brazil. And I came back and I said, instead of studying business, I think I'm going to be a botanist. My mom was not happy with that.
What were her concerns?
Well, so she was really, how are you even going to get a job?
Yeah.
So we're talking, this is in the late 80s. So the thought of making a career out of botany was not a very common trajectory. And the thought was really that botany was sort of like a really descriptive career, and very academic. And she was really, how you're going to make a living out of this.
So did you at that time have an idea that you saw it as the possibilities of it being something else and going beyond the academics?
I did not.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
At the time, I thought, I just love being around plants, and that's what I want to do. Wow. Even if it means, at the time I thought my golden dream would be to be a professor at a university. And I thought I may not get that. I could always teach children, which were another passion of mine. Yeah. I always loved being around children, so both options were equally appealing to me.
So, as you kept your interest in plants alive, but how did you really keep it alive as you got into, middle school and high school? Were they specific teachers that you had, or?
So, yeah, that's also interesting, because actually it was really kind of an aha moment, I think. I never thought of botany as a career. And it's actually quite interesting, because I feel like my mom really inspired me. And interesting enough, the plant group I selected to do my in-depth study, which is the trumpet creeper plant family, was actually my mom's favorite.
Is that right? Is that why you chose it?
Well, probably, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think about it, but...
Did you have trumpet creeper plants in your yard?
So in Brazil, it's interesting because the trumpet creepers, they're not very diverse here in the US. I just finished my treatment for Flora of North America, which I'm very proud of. And it's around 15 species in North America. In Brazil, it's 450.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of species. And one of which is actually the national tree of Brazil.
Oh, okay.
So it's called the Ipe wood.
Oh,
It's
Ipe,
one of
oh,
the
yeah,
popular
right, yeah.
names, and it's really valuable wood and so forth. And that's the group I chose.
Interesting. I mean, I personally have an experience with trumpet creeper because my next door neighbor has a trumpet creeper vine, which is native, and it shows up all over my gardens. And it doesn't know that there's a fence between the yards. So that's an interesting one to talk about. Yes, it is. Okay. So, you know, I know that your family has, you have a very interesting family from some conversations that we've had. And before we move on, would you talk a little bit about your extended family and your great-grandfather and your grandmother and...
So it is a very interesting family. My great-grandfather became a widow at age 37 with 9 daughters. Imagine yourself.
Imagine yourself.
With 9 daughters,
Yeah.
age 37. And no women ever came close to him again. And my grandmother was actually the oldest of the 9 daughters, and the youngest, was a baby, and my grandmother was 13 years old, and she essentially raised all of her sisters. And my great-grandfather was actually an astronomer, and he built the planetary in Sao Paulo, and he told my grandmother and her sisters that he wanted to build a school. So he said, okay, each one of you have to study a different topic, and we're going to have a school. So my grandmother, who was born in 1913, she studied mathematics. Her sisters, one was a chemist, the other one studied literature, the other one studied philosophy, the other one studied history. And the goal was that none of them would get married, and they would have a school.
Can you imagine their dinner table conversations?
But it didn't quite turn out that way, because all of them got married and the school never happened.
Never happened.
But the conversations remained interesting.
They were
at
good.
dinner.
Yeah. But also, I know you've mentioned their interest in music and the arts, and I think from talking to you again, you can see the threads of those interests come out in what you do and what you are working towards.
Yeah, which is, it's very interesting. So my grandfather, I was just talking about my mom's mother. My mom's father he was the one on the photo who was a visionary and always really around nature. And, in the 1950s, he started doing composting because he was worried about waste and things like that. And he ended up being involved in multiple things in Brazil, and he actually established, so in São Paulo, we have a very large park called Parque Ibirapuera, and at the time, he ended up, he was a pure academic, but ended up going into the government. And he was involved into establishing Parque Ibirapuera, which is equivalent to our forest park here.
And what's the year for that again?
So this is 1950. So he was in the government between 1950 and 54. And the priority was really to establish, so this is when São Paulo was turning 400 years. And he was in charge of all the celebrations. And so São Paulo created all the cultural institutions at the same time.
That's amazing.
Which is, I think, one of the reasons I feel very much at home in St. Louis, because São Paulo is all about the cultural institutions in a large park. Does it sound familiar? And the universities and the innovation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great story. That's really great. So as you eventually found your way from Brazil to St. Louis, and what led you to choose UMSL for your graduate studies?
So I decided I wanted to be a botanist. So I was 16, which was my aha moment during this trip. And I decided I wanted to be a botanist, a plant systematist, and that I would study biology. And I started doing field work right away.
Oh, wow, okay.
And during one of my field trips when I was an undergraduate, I collected a lot of species in the Amazon basin. But we didn't have collections that would allow us to actually put names into those plants. And so as a 17-year-old in Brazil, I knew that if I wanted to identify those plants from the Amazon basin, I had to come to the Missouri Botanical Garden.
That's amazing.
Yes, that was
So you had read about the Missouri Botanical Garden and you knew.
So, yeah, and it's remarkable, isn't it? So a 17-year-old in Brazil, and I knew it. So I came to St. Louis initially as an undergraduate student to identify those plants. And I remember so well, I was in the herbarium working, and at that time, Mick Richardson used to be the director of graduate studies. And he walked around and he said, "Young lady, did you know that we have a graduate program and you could come back?" And I was talking to another student and he was telling both of us, like, you should come and apply for graduate school.
Wow.
And so I did and ended up coming back to St. Louis.
And in particular, what about UMSL attracted you? Was it, in terms of how they oriented their program?
That's a great question. And so at the time, there was a tradition that the garden was always very international. And even in that visit, there were students from all over the world working in the herbarium and so forth. And the international students, for some reason, used to go more to UMSL than to WashU.
Oh, okay.
So when they told me about the graduate program, I didn't even know, for example, that WashU might be an option, and I only applied for UMSL. And it was the perfect fit for me.
It sounds like it.
Because it really was a very international program, and I always remember one of my committee members used to say, that the goal was for students to be trained and academically, but also leadership skills, so forth, and then go back to their countries and go make a difference. That was our motto.
So when you arrived, did you know anyone in St. Louis?
I did not.
That could be a little intimidating.
Yes, and I actually remember quite well my first day coming back coming back for graduate school. So I felt like I worked so hard for over a year to make sure I was accepted at university. And when I finally arrived, I put my bags on the floor and I looked around and I cried. It's like, what do I do now? No cell phones in those days. I couldn't call my mom. And I just went on a walk around the block.
Is that right?
And actually, while walking around the block, I met a student from Côte d'Ivoire.
From the Ivory Coast of
Ivory
Africa.
Coast, who was also in the program. And I had my Mobot badge. And he said, "Are you a new student?" And that day, there was a party with the new students getting together. And, not the new students, students from the garden. And I went to meet them. And after that, I felt completely embraced by all the colleagues and by the city of St. Louis.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And what were your first impressions of St. Louis and the garden when you first arrived? I mean, you've sort of been skirting around that, but are there any really specific, visual memories that you have of?
And that's very interesting. Actually, so right before I left Brazil, one of my professors at the University of São Paulo, he told me, "Come here, I will show you something." I said, "What is it?" He's like, "I'll show you the place where you were going." And I said, how can that be possible? And he's like, opened his computer and he said, this thing is called World Wide Web. And through this, we're going to be able, I will show you the place you're going to. This was the first time I saw the web.
That's amazing.
And then I saw the garden.
But I can only imagine that your professors at the University of Sao Paulo maybe were sorry to see you leaving the country.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And at the time, that is another, I had actually forgotten about that, but they were, stay. And I said, well, I'll go, but I'll be back.
Okay.
So my life is all about going and coming back.
That's good. And when you came to St. Louis, when did you first meet Dr. Raven?
So Dr. Peter Raven, that's also a wonderful question because throughout Latin America, actually throughout the world, everybody used his textbook. So Raven's textbook, and that's what we used for botany at the University of Sao Paulo. And actually a small anecdote, in Portuguese, we say heaven. So it was like Peter Heaven is how people would say.
Yeah.
And so I knew a lot about him, but I never had actually met him in person. And when I arrived, got to meet him, and he was part of my PhD thesis committee. So I would meet with him once every 6 months to go over my progress. And I remember 1 hour with him was incredible. I had work for another 6 months.
So he was a mentor to you.
Oh, yes, very much so. And
And so you met him early on when you arrived in St. Louis. And yes.
Yeah, so I was 21. Exactly. It's the year I arrived, and I remember he pushed me to work hard. And one thing he used to say, because sometimes he'd say, you have to do this and this and this. It's like, Peter, there's no time in the day. And then he told me once, the day has 24 hours, and then there is the night. So he did push me to work hard.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Okay, so we're going to go to a little bit different topic, but related, and that is to talk about your research that you've done, your field research. And as I said in my introduction, that you spent a lot of your time working and your interest in the Amazon basin. And what about the Amazon basin checked all the boxes for you that made you want to focus there?
So again, I feel like a lot of things go back to childhood memories, right? When I was a child, the Amazon basin was on the cover of all magazines. Because there was a major highway called Trans-Amazonica Highway that was being built, and people were starting to discover things about the Amazon. This is back beginning of the 70s. And I always had this dream of going into the Amazon basin. And as a botanist, the Amazon basin, is the place with the highest number of species on Earth. So there are around 40,000 plant species in the Amazon, and we estimate that only 10% have been described.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And even going a little further, if we think that around 25% of the pharmaceuticals that we use today have an origin in the Amazon basin, and that's pretty remarkable.
That is very remarkable. It really is. And when you started this research, I have a couple of questions for you on this topic. How did you pick your specific areas in the Amazon that you were going to work on? How did you, who made up your team of people that you went with? And also, the systematics that you studied in graduate school, and if you could talk about what that really is and how that impacted your work. So that's 3 questions in a row, sorry. But I know your research, and yeah.
So the Amazon was really, at the beginning, was sort of, discovery and just going in and finding out about species. And I would always tell people the good thing of working in the Amazon is everything is new. So whatever thing you find, it's always new. And literally every single trip we've done to the Amazon basin, even to places that are around Manaus, which is the capital of the state of Amazonas, lots of new species. So for example, my first trip to the Amazon was to the Duque Reserve, which was named after Adolfo Duque, a famous botanist. And they told us, okay, let's start doing a field guide for this reserve, because this is the best well-known place in the Amazon basin. And I was initially invited to go do the treatment for the trumpet creepers. And they told me, okay, we've studied this place for decades. There are 15 species. So after a year, I had already cataloged 150.
Wow, that's amazing. And didn't you say earlier there were 400 species in the?
Well, just
in that one area.
Just in a small area.
Yeah, that many species.
Yeah, 150. Wow. And so now we produced the field guide, and this was the best well-known place. Wow. And after that, started going and collecting in different places. And some of my early field trips was just a metal boat, myself, my field assistant, a bag of canned food, and we would go through the Amazon River, especially in
by boat. You would go by boat because that was the best way.
Yeah, tiny little boat, and we would just end of the day knock at the door of some of the rubber tappers who had small houses along the river, and just say, "Can we hang our hammock here?" Wow. Because these are regions where there's lots of jaguars, and because in other places we would just hang our hammocks in the forest, but not in Acre, so we would just, and then they would let us in.
That's amazing. How long would you be gone at any one time?
A month and a half, 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And well, in one of my first trips, I was 21 years old, and I remember going through upriver, and some of the local people, first they would ask me, well, they would call me doctor because they thought I was a medical doctor. They're like, why would somebody be coming through these rivers, right? and they would tell me, they would ask me, the first question, doctor, you're 21 years old. Why did you decide to not have a family, not marry, and devote
they just got right into it.
Because they thought 21 years old.
Yeah.
I was too old to have a family.
Interesting.
So it's like, okay.
Different cultures.
Exactly.
Different cultures. Yes. That is so interesting. And is there one field study in particular that you did that you'd like to share, the exciting details?
So maybe I'll share two, can I?
Okay, yes, of course.
So the first one, my first really extreme trip was actually with staff from the Missouri Botanical Garden. And this was Bruce Allen, Randy Evans, and we decided to collect in Suriname in the Tafelberg Tepui. So we took our backpacks with freeze-dried food, and that we got at Whole Foods. Enough for for 15 days.
Wow.
And there were no GPS or anything in those.
Really?
Yep. So we just went, and we had a local person, a member from like an indigenous community who didn't speak English, and who just showed us the path, and we climbed all the way to this Tafelberg and collected there for 15 days, and then went down, and So this was the first really extreme trip.
And so you're also experiencing, I would think, extremes in temperature and weather in these different situations, and
it really was quite something. Yes.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And maybe the second one was 2 years ago. 3 years ago now already. Wow. We were able to establish a partnership with the Brazilian Army, and the goal was to start collecting in mountain ranges in the Amazon basin where nobody else had been. And this trip was Yanomami territory, and even the Yanomamis, they said, we got in touch with them and we said, we want to go and collect species there. Would you like to come? And they said, no. like, you go and you tell us what you find, but we're staying here. But it really was quite something, because it was very small window in November when you're able to go with helicopters, because we needed no clouds at the bottom where we were and no clouds high up.
What altitude are you about?
So 2,000 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the helicopter could go and land in this region, and we were there for around 15 days. And we had a very diverse team, not just botanists, but also zoologists collecting all kinds of things, and even parasites, and it was quite something. And I, was collecting a plant on top of a tree. I fell and I broke 6 ribs, which was not planned.
And you stayed.
And
you didn't get airlifted off. You stayed and finished your research.
Yeah. We had a medical doctor that was there.
Yeah.
And she had some.
But you didn't always have a medical doctor with you on your field trips.
No. Just on that one with the Army. Yes.
And when was the last field trip that you actively participated in?
This was the last one, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a little over 2 years ago.
A little over 2 years ago. That's amazing.
And this is when then Berkeley and here and getting ready for another one.
Yeah. So I know you've talked about yourself as a student, and you've been a professor at 2 universities. And tell us a bit about how you look upon your students and the role and mentoring and that relationship.
So, and it's interesting, because often when people ask me about what you're most proud of in your career and things, the first thing that comes to my mind are my students.
That's awesome.
Because, it really, around 30 graduate students between the PhD and master's level, and then hundreds of undergraduate students and in classes and so forth. But what was always really interesting is that we had a very cohesive research program. So it was sort of as each student had a little piece of a puzzle, and together we were building this collective understanding of this plant group and the Amazon basin that none of us individually would have been able to do.
Unless, like you said, you put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Exactly. Yeah. And now I look at my students, so I have several of my students who are professors in Europe or in Latin America, some in the United States, and some even working at Kew Gardens.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that's fun. So they have stayed in the field of botany in research or teaching or in some way, shape, or form. That's wonderful.
Most of them have. There's a few who went into more business, but then really looking at plants as a source of inspiration for cosmetics and for other things. So somehow botany always connected. So it really feels like sort of training the trainers, which was also what happened to me here. So UMSL trained me. I went back, trained dozens of students, and now each of these students are going off and training another dozen students, and Do
you think that happens as much in other sciences or do you think there's something about the plant world that?
That's a great question, and I never thought much about that, but there is a sense of, in some ways, for field work and things like that, we usually need also large teams and the magnitude of the task just to describe all the species that are out there. So we have 350,000 species of plants that have been described. And if we think that only 10% have been described, we have endless work ahead of us. So we do need large teams, and maybe that's why it happens that way.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think that sounds like a very reasonable answer. So coming back to St. Louis, coming into the garden, what drew you back to St. Louis?
So a combination of many different things. And one thing I should mention also is, so I first came to St. Louis, I was 21. I got back at 51, 30 years later. But so I was here for nearly a decade in graduate school and so forth, went back to Brazil. But I always remained connected with St. Louis, and I always tried to come back whenever I could. And it was always a place that I loved and really felt very much at home.
Okay.
And then at the same time, well, just the thought of being able to give back to a place that I love, and at the same time promote botany at a global scale.
Yes.
In some ways was really interesting that while in those 20 years that I was gone, so leading international institutions and traveling through Africa, Asia, Latin America. So having this global perspective and the training, the education, the research, coming back to a place where we could think, okay, what is next? And how can we grow the garden locally, but also with a global impact and all the research and everything that goes behind was like a dream.
Well, and I think also, I would think that, you've always had these collaborations with other scientists and with your students and other professors, but I think, being here at the garden, you get a whole nother group of people to collaborate with, our members, which I think is just remarkable.
And I should say that one of the things that I enjoy the most since I arrived was really talking to people and hearing about their favorite stories about our garden, because it's our garden, right? So just everybody has a childhood connection or a moment of celebration, and just what this place represents to all of us is
very special. So do you think that when you described earlier you're growing up and all of your family members and all the experiences you had, and you had a very close family, do you think that experience kind of really did a great job of preparing you? Because this is like a family.
Yeah, and it's interesting because actually, and when I think about the different steps in my life, and I think all of us somehow has this sense things just happen for a reason, but at the same time, being in St. Louis, getting this amazing education that I got here, then going back to Brazil, all the training, conducting research, working with people in Africa and Latin America, leading global institutions, going to UC Berkeley, which was this amazing center of innovation, and I felt every day in Berkeley something different happens, and so much. It really felt like a natural step. And it feels like home, really.
That's good. And I guess you also, because of your relationship with Dr. Raven, you got to see him go through all those different phases of his career and then be here as the head of the garden. And so you really saw him a lot in that role.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, he was also at UC Berkeley alum. There's some California connections also. Somehow St. Louis in California, there's something also. I often hear people, I go to California, or I was born in California. There's something there, lots of connections.
And what partnerships or initiatives at the garden are you most excited about right now?
There's so many. So let's see. Maybe I'll start with the research and then move into other things. And so one big thing right now is what we call RSI, which is Revolutionizing Species Identification Project. And what we are doing is, so we have the largest herbarium in the world here in St. Louis at the garden. And we are digitizing all these images, making them available to the whole world. So for example, like somebody like me in Brazil, when I was back in Brazil, so people can actually see the images and use to identify their plants all over the world. And at the same time, we hope that by making the images available, people will actually want to come visit more, because you can see the images, you can identify, but at the same time, you can then go back to the specimens and look at their chemistry, look at their anatomy, look at their DNA, and use this information for all kinds of other novel research.
So this global access will really be a huge incentive for people to come and see it in person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we want to make the information available and also in a format that is really accessible to anyone. So if people are more interested in conservation or gardening or chemistry or school projects in a way that really like a center of plant knowledge, using the specimens as basis where people can go in and get all the information that they need, and in a fun way, with lots of images and excitement.
And there are so many groups in St. Louis to partner with. And do we partner more with others, obviously, than some, and but yeah.
Well, and I also, it's interesting, even going to my days as a graduate student, I always felt that the garden was a hub in St. Louis, because we brought, for example, all the universities together, because each university has a different strength, and all the students from the different universities, they would meet at the garden. In fact, I used to run it was UMSL, SLU, Webster, WashU Journal Club, and we would all meet on Fridays. And at the same time, I feel we're at a time when the connections with different fields, so arts and sciences, and this is an amazing opportunity to also work more closely with the other cultural institutions in St. Louis, thinking about multidisciplinary projects and ways that we can really work even more closely together.
Because it all goes back to collaboration and sharing information and knowledge, and
And I think that's a key word when people ask me. I think that's a key word for me is connection and meaningful connections and collaborations and what we can do together.
Yes, I can see that that's a priority of yours, for sure. So on a personal list of priorities, how are your husband and daughters adjusting to life in St. Louis? Your 3 daughters.
So that's another great question, and it's funny because my daughters, they were like, okay, Mom, now we go to St. Louis, because they had been hearing me talk about St. Louis throughout their lives, and they didn't know what St. Louis was. And they're like, yes, they learned to love St. Louis just by hearing me talk about it all the time.
Are they up there on the
and for my twins, this was also a full circle. There's a photo right there when they were 6 months old. And I had to give a talk in Florida, and then on my way back, I stopped at the garden, and the girls were with me. And then we got to visit the garden, and everyone saw the girls. I clearly had my hands full. My youngest is 2.5 years younger than my twins. So I had my twins 2.5 years old, and then my youngest was born. So it was a busy time.
That was very busy. And are they particularly interested in plants?
So, since they're little, I keep telling names of plants and things, and I'm pretty sure they absorb. I'm not sure if that is going to be integrated in their career, but Flora, for example, Flora, of course, one of my twins is named Flora.
Makes total sense.
He's like, and she's into photography, and she has been taking some beautiful photos also of flowers and things.
That's great. That's great. That's great. So the garden has an incredible community of supporters, over 50,000 member households, families who have been members for generations, members who have been part of the garden for decades, and many newer members and visitors. So how do you honor the garden's legacy, but also look forward to make sure that the garden is addressing the concerns and interests of newer members?
So, of course, we are on the shoulders of giants, right? 166 years from Henry Shaw and all the different directors and all the legacy, which first is inspiring and humbling at the same time. And at the same time, it's really interesting thinking about we are in a changing world. So how do we honor the legacy and build on the tradition, but at the same time with a very forward look and being solutions, thinking about the next decade and how do we, for example, engage new children with the garden. And again, goes back to our childhood memories. And I feel unless children are inspired and really connected to nature when they're little, this is the time when they really learn how to value the natural world.
Yes.
And we have the perfect space for that.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. And when a first-time visitor comes to the garden, how do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to take away from their visit and experience?
So I think I would say the sense of wonder. And so the first thing, just walking around the grounds and looking at the plants and just inspired by the plants and the beauty, which is also something that has been pretty much in my mind, like how can we make it, always better and even, increasing that sense of wonder. And at the same time, everything that goes behind it, right? So every plant in a particular place has a reason, and all the science that goes behind it, and all the native plant species that are attracting new pollinators and are really important to maintain the local biodiversity, while at the same time looking at plants from a global impact and what does it mean. And so really the sense of wonder, an understanding of the science and that goes behind it, and at the same time, so we're really a sense of stewardship for nature.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, very good way to put it. And what is ahead for our members and visitors in the coming months?
So a lot.
Good news.
The first thing maybe you can even see today is the Linnean house that went through major construction, and it's looking gorgeous. So if you haven't seen it, make sure to stop by today before you leave. And of course, Glow is a big hit, and it's coming up soon, and you'll be surprised. Even if you've been to Glow before, there will be new things and more lights than ever. We are also planning a couple new things for next year, and not sure if I can say it, but I will, so don't tell anybody. But we have a new exhibit coming up, which is Patterns of Nature, the Art of High Kozo. So these will be 28 sculptures that will be around the garden. Beautiful.
It sounds fascinating. It sounds really good.
Really.
And what about at the Sax Museum? Is there...
So at the Sax Museum, we are also planning a new exhibit that is going to be the literary garden. So it's really at the interface between books and plants and gardens, which, of course, going back to what we were just saying, ways to bridge with other cultural institutions in St. Louis and collaborate on new projects.
New projects, absolutely. And are there any updates or improvements to landscapes and gardens that will be...
So one thing I'm especially excited about is for next year, we'll be engaging in our strategic planning process and also starting a new master plan. So the goal is to do both things in parallel. And so this will be really a fantastic opportunity to rethink and plan and imagine, how do we want the garden to look 10 years from now? What is the future? And I think this will be a very exciting time, and I will really welcome everybody's feedback. There will be opportunities for feedback, and if you're especially interested in providing feedback, look for us, because we would love to hear your thoughts and have you engaged in the process.
Well, that's a lot to look forward to. It sounds wonderful. It sounds wonderful. And I would like to end with this question. And I can understand if you might want to keep it a secret, but do you have a favorite place at the garden?
Ooh. Well, can I say two again?
Yes.
And it actually goes back a little bit also to my days as a graduate student. So one of them was the climatron. So coming from the Amazon rainforest and the tropical regions, and especially in the really cold winter days, I just go and hide in the climatron for a little bit and maybe even grab a jabuticaba, which is a Brazilian fruit that is available in the climatron. And the other one is the herbarium. So I was here in St. Louis during graduate school for 8 years, because I did a conservation certificate, a master's, a PhD, and a postdoc, always finding an excuse to stay a little longer. And I spent quite a bit of time in the herbarium, and I feel that's my...
Where was it when you were working in the herbarium?
So when I first came to St. Louis, it was in the Lohmann building. So the Lohmann building was everything we had.
Yeah.
And all the research was happening there, and then we later became the Monsanto building, and now the Bayer building. And so I actually helped move the specimens.
Oh, did you really?
As a graduate student.
Oh my gosh. There are a lot of specimens there.
Yes.
I think that is one of the fascinating tours in the garden, to go up to the herbarium. And I think it is open at various times to members.
Yes, yes.
I mean, specimens from Darwin's HMS Beagle and the rare books. I mean, it is fascinating. Yeah, it really is.
And I'm glad you're bringing that up, because if you haven't seen it and you'd like to see it, there are tours. And also in the same building, we have the Peter H. Raven Library with rare books also. And it's a fantastic collection.
It is.
Really remarkable.
It is amazing. And also their conservation department here at the garden. Yes. That's fascinating to go in and listen to the conservator talk about the processes they use. Yeah. It really is great.
Yeah, and I think all the combination of our mission areas, so research and conservation, and then also the education and horticulture and science communication, it's a brilliant combination, really.
So see, if you do go on a tour of the herbarium, you might run into Dr. Lohmann up there. So I think we have a few minutes left for questions from our audience, and there will be microphones circulating on either side. And if you have a question and can wait until the microphone comes to you, that would be great. Let's start right up here.
Do you have any connection to the Danforth Plant Center?
Excellent question. So the Danforth Plant Science Center was created when I was here as a graduate student. And so I kind of saw it, and got to see Bill Danforth giving talks and things. As president of the garden, I sit on the board, which has been fantastic. And my main PhD supervisor, I had two main PhD supervisors, Drs. Toby Kellogg and Peter Stevens. And then I had my thesis committee members, which were Dr. Peter Raven, Nick Richardson, Charlotte Taylor, and Betty Lazelle. But my main PhD supervisor, Dr. Toby Kellogg, she was also a researcher at the Danforth. So I got to learn a lot about the Danforth and visit when I was a graduate student, and continue to work very closely. And so that's one institution that we have lots of really good ties, and I'm really trying to think about our next chapters together.
Here we go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lohmann, for your remarks and for your research and educational leadership for many years. I wanted to go back to your passion for the Amazon, and I'd read that as much as 80% of the Amazon has been destroyed because of, or the 80% of the destruction is attributed to cattle farming. And I wondered what role you see for botanical gardens to play in dealing with this understandably delicate issue of meat, given how ingrained it is in our culture and across the globe. Is there some examples of where botanical gardens are innovatively trying to get people to think differently about meat and how it's impacting places like the Amazon basin? Thank you.
So, and there are different numbers out there, right? And I think it's closer to 80% we usually say for the Atlantic forest, and then the Amazon still, we hope, around 20% destroyed and 80 impact. So still some. And it's good also to remember that the Amazon basin, the size of it is the size of the 48 contiguous United States. So that
is
means
a great visual picture.
you fly for 5 hours in the Amazon basin and it's forest, 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 forest. It's also important to remember that there are billions of trees in the Amazon basin. Each tree in the Amazon, the Amazon basin as a whole puts into the atmosphere 20 trillion liters of water, which gives rise to flying rivers. And these flying rivers are actually the air conditioning to the world. So if we don't have the Amazon, we'd really be in trouble. Sometimes people ask, is the Amazon basin the lungs of the planet? It's actually the air conditioning because it cools it down. And so right now in Brazil, it's happening, the COP, the Conference of the Parties, right? And one big conversation is around the bioeconomy. And how can we think of natural, products from the forest so we can keep the forest as is instead of cutting it down for cattle and other things. The soil in the Amazon basin is sand. So once it's cut, you can't even grow much on top of it. But the diversity and all the products and everything, so hopefully that's really a path forward.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you so much for the great question.
Okay.
Thank you.
In your vision of looking forward, do you see the ongoing mission, mission of the garden to cultivate and reintroduce species extinct or rare in the wild, where we have the seeds in a seed bank and can reintroduce them into the wild, like the National Botanical Garden of Hawaii?
So this is, the whole conservation program is something I'm really excited to discuss next year. And I think there's different lines of conservation. One of which is more focused on native species. And then, for example, at Shaw Nature Reserve and areas like that where we can cultivate a lot of the native species and bring all the local biodiversity and so forth, which is really connected to the CPC approach, which is the Center for Plant Conservation. And the thought of the CPC is, imagine if the United States, we chop it in like a grid, and each part of the state really focuses on its local biodiversity, and if everybody does the same, then we are able to preserve everything and have the local biodiversity where it is. So I think that's a very important line that will be moving forward. At the same time, there is quite a bit of room also for growing species from other places in encapsulated environments and then bringing them back to life. So the world really looks for the Missouri Botanical Garden, and it is incredible. Since I got here, maybe my main challenge is my email, which I can't keep up, but really it's people from all over the world who want to come here to be trained, to go back so they can preserve their species and so forth. So when I think of seed banks too, I keep thinking, imagine how wonderful for people to come, be trained, go back and create their own seed banks and establish their own conservation programs. And if we are able to do that throughout the world, with the whole world, each portion of the world doing their seed bank, and I think then we can really preserve biodiversity in the whole world. But of course, all in partnership, and it's a very exciting time.
That's amazing. Same row. Right there, okay.
Is our herbarium or collection of plant species actually now the largest in the world?
It is. And I will say a little more. Even some people are like, can we really say that? I said, yes, it is. So what happened is, For example, the herbarium in Paris, we always thought there were 11 million until they digitized the collections. And then we saw there were actually 7.5 million. And the same thing happened with a lot of other collections. And one thing that I think is very special of our collection is that it continues to grow. So there's several historical collections that by the 1950s, they stopped growing. And what is really remarkable of ours is that we have this continuous record. It's the fastest growing herbarium in the world. And we have this continuous record that keeps going forward. And looking forward, again, we are really a hub of training. And I think, not sure if everybody knows, but St. Louis is the city in the world that has the highest number of PhDs in botany. No other city in the world.
That's amazing.
And
Well, I guess when you think about it with Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, with the Harris World Ecology Center, the Cortex, all of them, that makes sense, I guess.
And I think also what is so unique is we have innovation districts, a lot of which are really looking for plants for new products in terms of for health and so forth. We have, some of the best hospitals in the world right here in St. Louis. And then at the same time, we have different universities that are with different focus and all the different plant research centers. So we are really a powerhouse.
It is amazing. And when you think about, the herbarium when it first started, and you had to go in as a single person, get permission, find the books, pull them out. And you physically, you had to make if you wanted to come and do it, you either lived nearby or you had to make a huge trip to come. Having it all this digitized, which is that RSI project, that's going to make an incredible difference to the world.
Yeah. And it's really an opportunity. As I was saying, one of our biggest challenge with plants is that there's so many species. And for people like me that was used to cataloging things in the Amazon basin, the magnitude of the task is endless. So out of our trip, I didn't mention that for this mountain range in the Amazon basin, not only we described new species, but we also described new genera and new families of vertebrates, not even plants. So describing a new family of frogs and lizards,
amazing.
which we did, is unheard of.
That is amazing. Bill, yes, you had a question.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Lohmann, for your time, and Lori for your facilitation. Dr. Lohmann, when you were first hired, I remember looking basically at the CV, your CV, and being impressed with the amount of leadership positions that you've taken in various national and international organizations. In my experience, academia and field science don't necessarily transfer automatically into leadership. I'm just wondering if you would talk a little bit about your path into leadership roles.
Thank you also for that question. And it's interesting because I think it all goes back to UMSL, which was the leadership training I got at UMSL. And I was always the one raising my hand and saying, I can help. And I can, to a point that my husband was like, no, don't raise your hand anymore. He's like, but as soon as I returned to Brazil, also something that happened, so a scientist going back to Brazil and with all my students and so forth, and I started being asked to be in a lot of panels and associations and things. So the first one of which was Diversitas, which was a very important organization in Europe at the time, really combining efforts. And then the Association for Tropical Biology and Conservation, and IAPT, which is International Association of Plant Taxonomists. And what was fascinating also about that was really, again, the collective effort around the globe. So these associations, they are mostly global, and ATBC, for example, we would do our conferences annually, each time in a different continent. So we'd do Latin America, Africa, Asia, which took us all over the globe. But it was really interesting, just imagine, so working with scientists from all over. And for me, I was always thinking, okay, so what is the role of international associations in terms of leadership globally? And it was very interesting because one answer because I would always ask that question too to people in the different countries. And then one question I would get often was, well, the role is to set some standards and also to help coordinate efforts and really make sure, let's say in Latin America, where I come from, or Africa and Asia, that people are doing the work, but toward going in the same direction. So we are using similar standards and we're really going together to the same direction.
It must have been, though, also very hopeful to attend these conferences with people all working together and really sharing their information, inspiring.
Yeah, and the ATBC, so I served as executive director for 6 years, and one thing I also always loved was we would have symposia, and we always made sure to mix things up in a way that you would have a leading scientist and an undergraduate student giving talks right after each other.
Oh, that's interesting.
So everybody was in the same room giving talks and exchanging ideas, and all that mattered were the ideas, not who people were, but whatever the ideas they had and how we could think creatively and contribute to the common good.
That's a unique way to do it, I think. It's great. Are there other questions over here?
Yep, we have a couple over here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Dr. Lohmann, I'm so happy you're here today, and I'm happy to be here to hear all of this wonderful information you're passing along to us. We've been over here joking, saying, "Oh, she's Indiana Jones." So I have the Vandeventer neighborhood community healing and meditation garden in St. Louis City. And there are a lot of us indigenous and people of color who are really interested in more farming and gardening, and we're just getting all into it now. I grew up with my family, into gardening. So what are you doing, or is the Botanical Gardens doing at this time to educate us more in our communities and urban communities? And then what can I do within my garden and get connected to be able to do more and educate people?
Wow, that's music to my ears. And it's actually interesting, right? So earlier this year, when we had the tornado, it was really a moment when we stopped to think about how are we contributing to the city, to the county, to all the region in St. Louis. And what you just described is something that has been very much in our minds. So we even started talking about how can we do training workshops, or we are even thinking about maybe with Shaw Nature Reserve, is there a possibility we can grow more plants that can contribute to turning St. Louis into the nature city of the 21st century?
That's a great idea.
So, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Don't leave without leaving your card. We need to talk.
Is there another question over there?
We have one final question.
Okay.
I wanted to combine two things that you talked about earlier. Number one, the destruction of the rainforest, but also you talked about working with biodiversity and like using the United States and dividing it up into a grid and everybody looking at what they had in each section. So my concern is with the destruction of the rainforest, have you lost a lot that you're never going to find again?
So, and the thought is to work together, right? And when I say, for example, sort of a grid, what I keep thinking is, imagine the herbaria in the region and so forth, making sure they're collecting constantly in partnership with everybody else, but building this long-term record and collecting in those regions where destruction is high, it's a huge priority. And of course, we continue to do field work and will continue to do so. But this is a huge opportunity for also the training locally, right? And then we can continue in partnerships to accelerate. The thought is also we need collections like the collection we have here, which is a truly global collection. And so the thought is by having people collecting locally and continuing our exchange. So every month we have boxes of specimens that we send out and boxes of specimens that are sent to us. And we need collections like that are really global so people can go to one place and work. But at the same time, when I talk about the grids, I keep imagining local seed banks that are really focused on a lot of native species and also the collections of specimens, but at the same time doing exchanges. But we couldn't possibly house all the species in the world. So in that case, what we would do is to select very clear lineages. What are the things we really would like to have for the reintroductions and so doing some ex situ, but also in situ and reintroduction, but really doing very targeted approach where we look at lineages that deserve more attention. And now that we have a phylogenetic framework, so we know which species are related to what, which I didn't when I was a student. This all happened in the 30 years of my career.
That's amazing.
Is when PCR was invented, when we started sequencing DNA. So when I first started, all we had were the specimens, and now we have evolutionary trees based on their DNA that we can use to tell stories, learn about their chemistry, and so many more things.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for
We're a little over time, so I think we could all agree we could go on all day for this conversation. But I have to thank Lori and Dr. Lohmann for joining us today, and I have to thank all of you for being here, for being a member of the garden. As a reminder, Member Appreciation Days is through Sunday, so a great time to renew your membership or share your love of the garden with somebody this holiday season with a gift membership. Those will be 20% off. And a reminder just today, just a few more hours, we have our little shop around the corner open house. So stop by for refreshments, an extra discount on your purchases. And my membership team and members of our development team are here. If you have any questions about all the offerings later in the week, just find one of us and we'll get you connected. But thank you again to both of you, and thank you to everyone. Have a great day.